Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to get started. If you don't know me, I'm Richard Battersby. I'm the Equipment Services Manager for the City of Oakland, and I'm also, in my spare time, the Volunteer Coordinator for the East Bay Clean Cities Coalition. I'm also the MC for this day's event, if you haven't figured that out yet. It's really good to see you all here today. I see a lot of familiar faces, which is always wonderful, but I also see plenty of new faces, which is equally as wonderful. So we're honored to have a distinguished guest here this morning to kick off the conference. I'm privileged to welcome to the podium Mayor Libby Schaaf, who is a longtime supporter of sustainable transportation and is a supporter of Governor Brown's pioneering vision to place 1.5 million zero-emission vehicles on California's roads by 2025. And the coolest thing about Mayor Schaaf is she has an alternative fuel flaming snail. She might tell you about that. So please welcome Mayor Schaaf to the podium.
Every day I am so proud to work for the City of Oakland. We are so lucky to have some of the most dedicated, passionate, talented employees in our midst. So thank you, Richard. I had the amazing experience of representing local governments at COP21 in Paris, also particularly thanks to Daniel, our sustainability manager. And it was this awesome experience to see the role of local governments and the role of governments coming together around a unified purpose and a unified vision about the work that we need to do that we will not necessarily see the fruits of immediately. This real obligation to our future generations. And so you couldn't have picked a better day to have the AltCar Expo here in Oakland. I don't know if you noticed a lot of alternative cars out on the plaza this morning, because today is Bike to Work Day. And I had this was my favorite commute I've ever had. I know I'm way off the speaking points you gave me, but I just have to emote about what an amazing region we live in. So I rode to work today on an electric bike so that I could wear this cute skirt and my heels, because part of my thing is to show people that you don't have to wear spandex to commute to work on a bike. You don't even have to be athletic. You can have an electric bike. It really does all the work for you. But I got to ride into work today with the Scraper Bike team. And if you haven't seen Scraper Bikes, it's a uniquely Oakland phenomenon. These are some young men from East Oakland that decorate their bikes. They are like art pieces. They have nothing on my flaming snail. I mean, these things, they're this high. They blare music. I mean, we had a soundtrack as we rode into Oakland today. It was amazing. The awareness that we have to do something to address climate change. I hope you feel very supported now, as at least this part of the country is very aware of our obligation. And I want to just thank the incredible public servants. I know not everyone is a public servant here, but a lot of you are public servants. And the level of collaboration, of partnership, and I'm looking at my AC Transit board member in the front. We had an amazing moment of collaboration and partnership last night as we saved bus service for some of Oakland's most deserving school children. And that took partnership. So I just, well, thank you, Chris. That's my job. That's the mayor's job, to pull things together. But I am very happy and happy to report, speaking of pulling things together, that the mayors of San Francisco, San Jose, and Oakland are unabashed regionalists. We recognize that we cannot see our cities as isolated islands, that things like climate change have no respect for municipal or, frankly, any governmental boundary. And so the fact that you are all here today doing this work is incredible, it is important, and I am incredibly grateful. So please have a fantastic day, and thank you so much for your passion for sustainability.
Well, thank you, Mayor Schaff. I have to say it's wonderful to work in an organization where you have the full support of the elected officials, you have the senior administration, management. We're all heading in the same direction. I know that doesn't occur everywhere, and I'm really grateful to have come here and found a wonderful home here with the City of Oakland. That sort of jives with what you're seeing out on the plaza today. Although this event is about alternative fuel vehicles, and there's another event out there on the plaza about bike to work, which they may seem contradictory. In reality, they're not. We're not asking someone to make a choice between riding a bike or driving an alternative fuel vehicle. We're presenting all the options that are out there. We're all working towards reducing our carbon emissions, working towards sustainability goals, working towards resiliency, and the only way to have success is to offer multiple options and do what we're doing right here today, which is communicating education, outreach, letting people know that there are other choices that they can make when it comes to transportation. And another goal of this event, as Mayor Schaff mentioned, the mayors of San Jose, San Francisco, and Oakland being regionalists, we are as well. If you're new to this group, you may not be aware that, especially in the Fleet area, the big three, as we call them in the Bay Area, we work closely together. I know my counterparts are out there, and at a time there was a pretty high-profile project with the MTC, and things have kind of quieted down out on the media side, but we're continuing to do the work. So we got together and thought it would be important. Let's communicate this message. Let's reestablish and reinforce these connections. And let's not just talk about the vehicle aspect, because that's what we talk about every day. Let's do a little discussion about the city's sustainability efforts that are in the region, because we do a lot here every day. So that was the reasoning behind this event. I'm really grateful to have you all out here today. And this is going to segue right into our first panel, where we've got representatives from the cities that are going to talk about sustainability. I've got a wonderful moderator here, Suzanne Lucen. I've got history with Suzanne going way back to, she worked up in the Marin area and never left the region, always worked in the same area. She's currently the Zero Emissions Vehicle Coordinator at the San Francisco Department of the Environment, where she works with public and private sector stakeholders to facilitate reductions in petroleum use and improved air quality through the adoption of alternative fuels, vehicles, and technologies. Her background includes 20 years of experience in private and public sector environmental infrastructure and transportation program management and communications. Since 2011, she has worked closely with local governments, nonprofit organizations, and community advocates to promote electric vehicle fleet and infrastructure planning, deployment, and outreach. So with that, please welcome Suzanne Lucen to the podium.
Note to self, edit the bio. Hi, welcome. I'm really, my name's Suzanne Lucen. I'm the Clean Cities Coordinator for the City and County of San Francisco and the San Francisco Department of Environment. And I'm here just to facilitate this, this panel, which, as Richard said, and I'll invite the panel members to come on up and take your seats, that we put this together to give you an idea of what happens beyond our work, what actually encapsulates our work in this regional setting that we have. So we have speakers here from San Jose. I'm going to get my sheet. From the sustainability departments of San Jose, San Francisco, and Oakland. And they're each going to give a brief presentation, and then we'll have time for Q&A at the end. I'm going to introduce each one as they come up, and if you'll hold your questions to the end, that'd be great. And for the panelists, we have a timekeeper, my colleague Zach Thompson up here. He's going to, we said 10 to 15 minutes, so at 10 minutes, he's going to give you a 2-minute, a 1-minute, and then a wrap it up, please. Appreciate that. And so I'm going to go ahead and just introduce our first speaker, who's Phil Cornish from the City of San Jose. Phil works in the Sustainability and Compliance Division of San Jose's Environmental Services Department. Before working on energy projects such as Property Assessed Clean Energy, or PACE, and the City Energy Project, CEP, which I'm looking forward to hearing about. He worked in the Municipal Environmental Compliance and Land Use Planning Groups on alternative energy and capital improvement program projects for the Regional Wastewater Facility. So, Phil's first, and let's see if I can actually make this happen without sending us to someplace else. Alt-Tab. Well, except it's the wrong one. Help. Keep alt tabbing. Oh, hi. And then F5?
Good job.
Okay. Now we get out of the way.
Thanks for having me, everyone. My name is Phil Cornish. I'm with the City of San Jose. I'm going to give a broad overview of different sustainability programs we have going on in San Jose. The first, we do have a lot going on, and the first exciting thing we have is developing a new environmental sustainability plan. In 2007, we had a green vision, which had 10 goals, and it was very city municipality oriented, and so we need a new sustainability plan that's more of a community plan that has a broader stakeholder makeup and is really anchored in and has a strong community buy-in. Mayor Sam Liccardo asked staff to focus on greenhouse gas reduction tied to energy and mobility, as well as developing a sustainable water supply. I am not going to talk too much about mobility. We have Dan Sunseri, my colleague from the city, who's going to talk about our fleet, and certainly our Department of Transportation with their bike plan and our general plan will all be included in our sustainability plan. This is basically going to take the green vision from back then and build on it and make clear goals and get community buy-in. We chose PricewaterhouseCoopers as our consultant, the same folks who did LA's plan, and community outreach has begun, and we expect the plan to come out in September of 2017. This is a big one. I'm not sure how familiar everyone is with community choice aggregation or community choice energy, so really quickly, a state law in 2002 allows a local government or group of governments to form an entity that can procure electricity for their citizens. The local utility provider still maintains the delivery system and the billing system, but this new entity takes over on procurement. A really kind of major reason for doing this is the city has more local control and can procure more an energy mix with a higher mix of renewables than PG&E can currently deliver. So it's a way to move towards goals that will show up in our sustainability plan. Right now, there is no choice. You pretty much have to buy your energy from PG&E, so this will give consumers a choice, but it will look very similar to them. We're expecting a decision on whether or not we decide to form our own entity next Tuesday, May 16th. So that's a really big deal. You would front load a rainy day fund, and then additional funds after that could be used to lower rates or develop energy efficiency programs. And the governing board of that new entity would decide what those programs are. But it's a really exciting decision that's coming right up. And you've probably noticed a lot of other areas in the region either have this already or are actively considering it. The City Energy Project is a joint partnership initiative of the Natural Resource Defense Council and the Institute for Market Transformation, funded by the Doris Duke Charitable Fund. They did a phase 1 with 10 cities across the nation, and they're currently in phase 2. And San Jose was awarded a CEP grant. It's the only city in California to have been awarded the grant, so we're very proud of that. It focuses on energy efficiency programs in large commercial buildings, primarily. Underneath that umbrella, there's a number of initiatives, such as a benchmarking and energy audit ordinance consideration. We're looking to do an energy code compliance assessment. We have a zero net energy education and incentivization program, a multifamily retrofit program, and financing, resource and education, and green leasing outreach. That is a project that I work directly on, so if anyone has questions about that, please let me know afterwards. SFU stands for Silicon Valley Energy Watch. San Mateo has an Energy Watch. There's other programs like this. It's a local government partnership between PG&E and Ecology Action. And it has a number of programs. We have a schools assistant program where we go to maybe some of the smaller schools that don't have as many resources to help them get applications in for Prop 39 funding. A big deadline is looming on that. So we're trying to reach out to as many schools as we can. It's all about lighting upgrades, energy efficiency, and funding like that, funding of projects like that. We have small and medium business assistance program, energy audits, direct installs, and rebates. We basically go out into the community and generate leads for Ecology Action to go perform audits to basically reduce GHG emissions through energy efficiency. We have a DIY toolkit. This is kind of a cute one. It's a toolbox that you can check out from the library, and it's got a bunch of different tools inside that you can take home and look for energy saving opportunities in your home. It has a few items that you can keep, like an LED light bulb, and then a bunch of them you return, and it can be kind of restocked and then checked out by the next person. We also have an energy innovation grant program. The city of San Jose is the administrator for the Silicon Valley Energy Watch, but the territory is all of Santa Clara County, so there's a bunch of other municipalities that are under this umbrella, and they can apply for grants for effective and replicable energy efficiency programs. We also have a training program, so we partner with other organizations to bring trainings to San Jose or nearby and offer that to all sorts of people, building managers, small businesses, schools. The topics really have a wide range. This is more or less PACE, Property Assessed Clean Energy, another project I work directly on, so if you have questions about that, I'm not sure which other cities around here have PACE in their city. It's one of many financing options for energy efficiency or energy generating installations at your residence or at your business. There's both R-PACE and C-PACE. We have a number of providers in San Jose that are authorized to do business there, and residential PACE is going well. The number of projects is pretty steadily going up. The number of commercial projects is very low, and so one thing we're doing in our city energy project is to look at why that is. Why isn't commercial PACE having uptake as it is in some other regions of the country? We're also following legislation related to PACE. There's some at the state level and some at the federal level. We have a number of water programs. This picture of this facility on the left is our regional wastewater facility. It actually serves other customers outside of San Jose as well. 1.4 million users. We have the region's cleanest effluent, which is released into the bay. It's a very old facility, and it's currently being renovated. Over the next 10 years, it's about $1.2 billion in upgrades and renovations and new technology. The biggest energy user out there are the blowers, which add oxygen to the effluent. The new technology there will reduce the energy consumption by those blowers by 40%. So there will be huge energy savings there. We also take the biogas generated by digesters and use it to produce electricity on site. And we're building a whole new cogen facility. We also have strong watershed protection programs. We're looking at a new green infrastructure program that cites bioswales in public right-of-ways like street medians, trying to roll out more pervious concretes and pavers and basically reduce the load on our waterways. We also have plastic bag ban and polystyrene bans, and we do a lot of inspections, and we have a laboratory that does a lot of testing. Okay, I'll be able to finish in 2 minutes. Thank you. And the sustainability plan will also evaluate new mechanisms for reducing water usage and ensuring a sustainable water supply. We don't know what those are yet. It's currently being developed, but we are engaging with the community on that. We also have a number of waste management programs. We do very well on recycling rates, both residential and commercial. We have a wet-dry system with a diversion rate of 70%. We have a partnership with ZWED, Zero Waste Energy Development Company. They take green waste and put it in digesters and produce electricity and compost. And our illegal dumping program just won the 2016 National Community Improvement Award from Keep America Beautiful. So that's a cutting edge program there. And the last slide, near and dear to my heart, we have a vibrant burrowing owl population. I also worked on this directly in my last role. Unfortunately, all other burrowing owl populations in the region are in decline, but we have a lot of open space around our wastewater facility, and our population is doing really well. We're enrolling some of that land into Santa Clara Valley Habitat Agency's reserve system. So it will be habitat forever, no threat of development on 200 acres. And we also partner with the Audubon Society and the San Francisco Bay Bird Observatory to help manage that land, and we're very proud of that population. And I'll do questions after everyone has presented. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for the time. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll be here all day.
Thank you. You guys have a lot going on. So our next speaker is my colleague, Barry Hooper from the city of San Francisco. And this is our opportunity to plug San Francisco's climate action strategy, which is 0, 50, 100 routes, if you haven't heard this before. And that means zero waste, 50% of all trips via sustainable modes, 100% renewable energy citywide, and that includes transportation, and using routes to pull carbon out of the atmosphere into trees and plants. So in support of San Francisco's climate action strategy, Barry Hooper leads development of the San Francisco Green Building Code, including the city's requirements that new buildings achieve Greenpoint rated or LEED standards, and solar PV or green roofs. He also manages the existing commercial buildings energy ordinance, which requires annual benchmarking of energy performance and an action plan for cost-effective energy efficiency improvement. And I think Barry's going to talk about our recently adopted EV readiness ordinance. So, Barry.
Thanks, Suzanne.
I'm going to let you do that.
I got it. Thanks. Well, howdy. Thank you for that nice introduction. You're going to hear a little bit of a similar thread here about from me to maybe add a little bit of context. So again, our aims really sound maybe wild if you haven't heard them before, right? We're aiming for zero waste, putting all material back to productive use at the end of its useful life. We want to make sure that at least 50% of transport is made on sustainable modes, so everything but single occupant internal combustion vehicles. We want to provide 100% renewable energy to this entire city, both the municipal operations and the private sector, and then be a net carbon sink through development of green infrastructure. So those all sound like pretty lofty goals, and they're set really more on a basis of a view of what we view as our responsibility as citizens of the earth. And the question then becomes, how practical are they? Can we actually do those things? And so for zero waste, similar to many of our colleagues around the Bay Area, we've made considerable progress. Both composting and recycling are mandatory for all collection points throughout the city, and more than 80% of the material that's collected citywide is put back into the waste stream and into the compost stream. So we still have room to grow there, but considerable progress toward that goal, and setting that ambitious goal really has been a major asset in motivating ourselves in the community to make that progress. In terms of transportation, we actually need to rethink this goal. It's kind of handy because it's 0, 50, 100. Maybe that's rhetorically handy, but on the other hand, actually this goal was hit in 2014, and really the challenge is both maintaining it and figuring out what the next steps are to move beyond that. And certainly your work is a major part of that. In terms of 100% renewable energy, as Suzanne pointed out, a lot of the initial emphasis is on renewable electricity, but it's important to meet our long-term greenhouse gas emission reduction goals that really be all-encompassing, so all energy end uses citywide. A major component of that, similar to San Jose, is the opening of the Clean Power SF Community Choice Aggregation Program, which is a opt-out program where this PG&E continues to provide all transmission and distribution services and billing even, so it feels just the same to the power customer. But the real main difference is the procurement, where the base offering, the city is able to offer that at a competitive level, but to offer more renewable energy even in the base offering. So right now that's at a little over 40%. It was at little over 30% when the program was launched about a year ago, and that base offering will continue to become more renewable. And then for a modest premium, there's also a 100% renewable option, which happens to be, what I have at my own home. And then interestingly, I think that availability of that procurement mechanism has also been a good motivator for PG&E, who's our partner in many things, to offer its own competitive offering. So you can get 100% renewable power now as an option from PG&E. And maybe that's a little awkward for the CCA, but I think that's really fantastic as a consumer to have options. And so the way that we internally look at this, and the way we've been talking about it for many years, is about greenhouse gas emission reductions. We use that phrasing 0, 50, 100 routes because those are much more tangible goals that can be met. Oh, and I'm sorry, I left out a key point. So on the 100% renewable energy goal, citywide, we're currently at about 46% of electricity that's delivered is now renewable, and it's our goal to get to 50% by 2020, and the CCA is one major element of that. But that progress has really been driven at its core by the combination of the city having its own municipal utility specifically for city facilities that's been renewable since the creation of the Hetch Hetchy system and the dams, the hydroelectric power that generates, as well as PG&E regularly complying with the legislative requirement to meet renewable portfolio standards and adding more and more renewables in the mix that they deliver. And so it's really the combination of those is a major asset and starting point. So if we were to put this in the more classic frame of greenhouse gas emissions reduction, because we do have a climate action strategy like other cities in California, we see that this idea of that there's a choice between doing well and doing good is false, and we see a clear decoupling of that. So as the city has grown considerably over the last 20 years and the economy has expanded even faster, greenhouse gas emissions have now been reduced by more than 28%, and that's third-party verified. It's not just us saying it. It goes out to ICF International for their review. And so then the question becomes, how can we solve these problems, right? How can we get to the 0, 50, 100? How can we get to it, really what we need to get to, 80 or 100% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by the year 2050? And so we did some engineering work with Siemens to ask this question: what's the practical reality? What's necessary to plan for to get to those ends? And the answer was, it's pretty straightforward, that we need to reduce, we need to renew, and we need to electrify. That electrification of transportation is a massive contributor, and particularly electric vehicles and electric car share are the two largest transportation emission reduction opportunities for us. And that's ends up being very similar in some ways to other California communities because much of our we do have very good public transit ridership, and that is the priority. But those transport modes are largely carbon-free already. They're either supplied with electricity from 100% hydropower or a renewable diesel. So there's a minimum and declining impact from public transit, and it is private vehicles and the city's own fleet of individual vehicles that are our core challenge in terms of transport. Looking at buildings, it's the same thing. There's not a silver bullet. There's a number of opportunities and efficiency in building in aggregate. They can contribute up to 30% of our needed emissions reduction. But if you did both of those, you electrify transportation, you maximize efficiency in buildings, you maximize photovoltaics citywide, we still wouldn't get to an 80% reduction. So what's missing? What's missing is heat pumps, right? What's missing is if we continue to primarily supply our thermal needs, our water heating, our space heating, and our buildings with natural gas appliances, even very efficient ones, we just make incremental progress, like asymptotic progress, but we can't actually get to our goals. And so what's essential is efficient means of delivering those comfort and security, thermal comfort and security through, and the technology actually is readily available and on the shelf today. So looking a little closer at electric vehicles and just how are we going to make electricity a key transportation fuel and of many. Of course, Suzanne and her team are doing a lot of work on many alternative fuels, and I'm sure you'll discuss that more today. But one of the challenges in looking at the most readily available technology today, being electric, is you need that fueling infrastructure to be as convenient and accessible as possible. And that's where we thought there's a major role for the citywide, when we look at what are the real problems that we face as a society converting to electrification of transportation, and its convenience, cost, range, and variety. And for 3 out of 4 of those, you guys get to solve, and you're making great progress on. Thank you. And convenience of charging is one element where the public can have a significant influence. And so we recently passed a electric vehicle readiness ordinance that has 2 major components. And I'm sorry, this isn't probably not readable for the folks in the very back, but we'll be happy to provide you more information. And the core of it is maybe a little different approach than most other cities, except for Oakland, have been taking, which is to ensure electrical service in buildings is sized to accommodate growth over the entire life of that building, because particularly in San Francisco, it becomes increasingly difficult to even get permission to demolish a building in the future, and installing new electrical service can be a massive expense. And so planning with that infrastructure and incorporating it in new construction can save up to 75% of the long-term cost of providing for electrification of vehicles in that building. So the basic idea is providing enough electrical service for simultaneous charging in 20% of parking spaces, building out circuits so that to 10% of parking spaces for level 2 charging, and the idea there just being it's as turnkey, it's as simple as possible to install a charger and provide charging. But we haven't required the actual charger itself, because in acknowledgement that many owners will take that step anyway given this level of infrastructure, and 2, the underlying technology can change, but the core need for providing electricity will remain. You can't power electric vehicles without electricity. And then the second major element of the ordinance is requiring the owner or HOA to annually notify the tenants that there's electric vehicle charging capacity available, so that they can work out the means of expanding charging within the building. And so we believe this accommodates growth of charging management without directly regulating that technology, and provides a lot of flexibility over the life of the building. And that ordinance really was a result of a collaboration led by the City of Oakland, where they got a grant from the California Energy Commission, and they worked with us with Fremont and San Francisco. We were the 3rd of the 3 cities to adopt our ordinance, And I think you'll hear a little bit more about that from Daniel. And Fremont was the first. In the process, we got a lot of input both from industry and the development industry and local stakeholders, and we really appreciated that both technical and political input, and I appreciate your time this morning.
Okay, and our last speaker is Daniel Hamilton, who serves as the Sustainability Manager for the City of Oakland. He has 20 years of experience in managing sustainability programs, policies, plans for local governments and utilities. He's led multiple award-winning projects and plans across California and has taught professional and university courses in energy management, sustainable policy development, and green building design and construction. He holds a BA in architecture and an MA in sustainable planning, both from the University of Kansas. So, there you go.
Rock chalk. Nobody out here knows what that means. Thank you. So you've heard some really nice broad-based summaries of sustainability going on in San Jose and San Francisco. I'm going to give you a little bit different take on Oakland. We are doing a lot of the things that you heard about in there. We have a robust PACE market for commercial and residential areas here in Oakland that's been thriving for about 6 or 7 years now. We have really ambitious greenhouse gas goals, not quite as ambitious as San Francisco's, but we've also been making fairly exceptional progress with ours. But you're all transportation people for the most part. So I thought I would focus the part of our story today on what we're doing in transportation to help pursue broad-based greenhouse gas reduction goals, as well as equity provisions. This is something that is not unique to Oakland's program, but it is absolutely the priority of our program. We pursue these through an equity lens. We don't look to reduce emissions just for the sake of addressing the global challenge of climate change, but also to improve local health outcomes, to create local jobs, to address historic inequities, especially around environmental issues. West Oakland is the neighborhood that we most talk about for that. It's a residential neighborhood, historically African American primarily, but it is located between 3 freeways and adjacent to the Port of Oakland and our wastewater treatment plant. In the 90s, the asthma rate, hospitalization rate from asthma was 16 times the national average. Today, it's 2 times the national average. We're going to start to explain how some of these things work towards that and why we focus on some elements of greening the transportation fleet, because specifically at areas like the port, at areas like the wastewater treatment plant and the freeways, the transition to clean vehicles has huge impacts to community health and creates partnerships and opportunities for collaboration to pursue these goals more deeply than you would if you're dealing with it purely from a carbon or GHG perspective. So just a little bit of bragging on our host, Richard. I stole your slide, by the way. I probably didn't tell you that. So Richard will cover in detail how this happened in here, but we're up to 38% of our fleet for alternative fuel or advanced technologies. You can see this is covering a range of different vehicle types. It's not just passenger vehicles. We're into light and medium duty trucks as well, hybrid sedans, neighborhood electric vehicles. What you don't see on this slide is the equipment owned by our 2 haulers, California Waste Solutions and Waste Management. And there we have about 125 vehicles in the fleet, garbage trucks picking up the compost, recycling, and solid waste within that. All of them are powered by natural gas, and 90 of the 125 are powered by liquefied natural gas produced at our landfill. So we do the methane capture at the landfill. We treat and refine on-site and fuel on-site. It's a completely closed-loop system. The first in the world was here in Oakland for that. This is a way that the transportation policies that are created broadly within City Council's direction as far back as 2003 have helped guide the development of other programs that impact transportation, like the Solid Waste Management Program. Law enforcement is a fun area. I don't know if you're going to get to talk about this in detail today, but there's a growing movement of replacing law enforcement vehicles with alternative fuel, including electric vehicles. Los Angeles has been doing amazing things in this area on here. We're up to 63% of non-law enforcement sedans in here, but law enforcement is coming on this slide. The goal is normally you see this slide, the exclusion of law enforcement. In a few years, you're going to see it inclusive of law enforcement. And LA is leading the way, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the way those partnerships go and how some of that's being developed. Fuel consumption, this pie is changing. The green is compressed natural gas. It's about 75,000 gallons here in Oakland. The blue is renewable diesel. We're at about 230,000 gallons. That represents every drop of diesel used by city fleet is on renewable diesel. That is the case for many of your cities as well. That's a growing area and is causing us to rethink whether we start purchasing diesel vehicles in the short term as well. If our carbon footprint is lower from renewable diesel, maybe that's a consideration in how we do procurement. And then unleaded gasoline in the red. Let's see how much we can shrink that. Barry mentioned the three cities, San Francisco, Oakland, and Fremont, that work together in implementing plug-in electric vehicle standards. Now, we all did this slightly differently. This was part of the benefit of the grant, that we were able to take different strategies towards this. Barry gave us nice credit in saying that we led this, but I think the most impressive outcome of this was actually Fremont. Fremont was able to get in a lot of the same standards that we did, only they got the chargers. You actually do the chargers in Fremont as part of the code. That's because Fremont has among the highest electric vehicle adoption rates anywhere in the country. You might be number one. Are you number one, Rachel?
We have the highest amount of EVs in Alameda County, but in terms of per capita, Palo Alto beats us.
Second to Palo Alto is not bad. So the Oakland variation on this work, though, was to look at the Cal Green standards, California Green Building Standards, list out minimum requirements, about 3% of parking spaces for commercial, for other specialty uses. One thing they don't touch is multifamily. Whereas when you have a lot of electric vehicles, especially this first generation of vehicles going through a lot of lease programs, the Leaf 3-year lease was a very popular option. When those come back out on the resale market, where do used vehicles tend to go? The multifamily sector. More than anything, that's the most common land use associated with those. And yet there are no standards for providing electric vehicle charging in the buildings where those people live. It's going to be a significant market constraint then there. We focused on multifamily in our standards. You can see we've broken it up by small buildings of all types, non-residential, and then multifamily 20 spaces or below, multifamily 20 spaces or above. Similar to what Barry said, we have the 10% full circuit requirement. You can plug a level 2 charger into that. That's 10% of spaces. That's ready to go. Another 10% panel capacity with inaccessible conduit. That gets you up to 20% for there. The reason we landed at 20% in those areas is that those are 40 amp circuits, and if you use appropriate load management technologies that are available today on the market, you could serve 100% of the spaces with that much electric capacity in the panels. So, as Barry said, the primary cost consideration here is the service upgrade for the panels. The second biggest is the inaccessible conduit. We put both of those in the standards to allow building owners the flexibility over time to use whatever charging types they want, whatever load management technologies they want, to scale up which spaces have chargers at which time, to give them the flexibility to be responsive to their tenants, but in a way that allows them to do that very cost effectively. For us, it reduced the cost of installing EV charging by more than 80%. It's really, really cheap to do electric vehicle charging once you have this built into your system. Now, this gets to new construction. It doesn't get to the existing building stock that's out there. That's the next major topic to challenge. We haven't found a cost-effective way to set standards to do that yet. Any ideas in the room? We'd love to hear them. One fun thing that we are offering right now, I don't see a lot of City of Oakland employees in the room, but it's something we're pushing through all of the marketing channels that we have, the city employees, just over 5,000 of them. The city negotiated a discount for all city employees over the next 2 months for purchase or lease of a Nissan Leaf, $10,000. Nissan is quite excited to get rid of the 2017 lease. We're going to take advantage of that. Yes, of course, the range is going up. All the new 200-mile range vehicles are coming on the market. It's obviously going to change how electric vehicle purchases are done and how they're marketed. In the meantime, we're going to get as many of these into the hands of city employees as we can. I send out emails fairly regularly to city staff on all kinds of sustainability issues about composting, about recycling rates, about changing out their monitors, turning off their lights, closing their blinds. For the most part, I get crickets. I told one meeting about this incentive a week and a half ago. I've gotten 25 emails. I get them from secretaries. I get them from maintenance workers in the field. People are tremendously interested in this. Richard is the one who found this deal and started these negotiations, and I finished it off for us. But this is a huge incentive. We're expecting, based on how the city of Seattle and Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, who both got a similar program before us, they had about a 10% response rate. 10%. That could mean 500 new leafs in the region because of this program, if we can hold up the 10%, which I think we're going to do. Just got to market it a little bit better. Finally, I want to talk a little bit about how governments are working together in the transportation field. Obviously, you guys are doing it from a very different perspective than folks up here do it. We do it looking at broad climate efforts on these, but a lot of them overlap with your clean transportation goals, and I want to make sure you know about some of the ones that are going on. The Pacific Coast Collaborative, this is about an 8-year-old organization. It's made up of the states of California, Oregon, Washington, the province of British Columbia, and 6 cities along the West Coast: Vancouver, Portland, Seattle, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Oakland. Oh yeah, I'm in it. Phil, you got to join. It's really fun. You'll like it. So with this, the Pacific Coast Collaborative has been working to do a lot of joint statements. We have 10 issue areas that we focus in that are all climate and equity related. There is an entire green fleets focus within this area. There's been joint marketing. The governors of the states largely take advantage of this, and it gives us a power for advocacy that we don't have as cities and local governments when we can have Governors Brown, and Inslee, and the Environmental Minister of British Columbia tend to be the main spokespeople for this. It gives a really powerful voice for those coming out. Anyway, when the Trump administration did their initial findings to start the process to roll back the corporate average fuel economy standards, for instance, we had joint statements already ready that came out the same morning that he announced that in Detroit. We announced how the West Coast governments were going to be working together to increase the amount of efficiency requirements, including the state of California, targeting an increase in the state standards at the same time. We counter that message very effectively, gets lots of media pickup, and helps change the narrative about where we're going as a nation. These are the kind of powers that these collaborations can have. PCC's been really busy since Trump was elected. I think we've put out in the neighborhood of 15 statements. 15 is about the number we put out since 2008 combined up until this. Mayor's National Climate Action Agenda is also one. This is a national organization. There are about 50 cities within this. The group put out an electric vehicle request for information that talked about how cities were going to be modernizing their fleet. Oakland's is in that. I believe San Francisco and San Jose are both in this RFI as well, along with Seattle, Los Angeles, Phoenix, Houston, a lot of the very large cities across the United States, talking about our conversions to electric vehicles. And finally, the good old-fashioned partnerships, the PEV grant code we mentioned, Volkswagen settlement, thanks to their emissions cheating scandal. They're putting more than $800 million into clean transportation in California. San Francisco, San Jose, and Oakland all put together a joint proposal showing how we're working together to try to green the Bay through transportation. We continue to do these things. We're going to keep doing them, not just the big 3, but all the cities in the Bay work together very closely on these issues. And I think it's an exciting time, and we're looking forward to taking advantage of your good ideas to make those the next round of what we team up together. Thank you. ACEEE says we're good too.
So how long do we have for questions and answers?
We have at least 10.
Like 10 minutes? Go. Do we have a microphone, or I know you're filming, so.
I can talk loud.
I think Chris can talk loud.
Yeah. I'm curious, here in Oakland, there's a lot of expertise on hydrogen heavy-duty vehicles. And I'm wondering whether you're looking at any of that for any of your heavy-duty vehicles, your trash haulers or anything like that.
Within the fleet itself, certainly the waste management side, we're not. Everything is focused on natural gas, and we're looking on finding ways to maximize the amount of fueling that we're doing through on-site resources. We think that's the best way to close the loop on the emissions cycle from that. We do have hydrogen fueling here in Oakland, and with regards to community-wide hydrogen, we talked to that industry about that when we set the new electric vehicle charging standards. There were some builders interested in some hydrogen infrastructure than that. We have not seen a code strategy yet that we think can scale very effectively, so we haven't done advocacy there. We have limited staff to do this with, and electric vehicles seem to be where we're focusing the most attention because there's traction in the marketplace for that. Richard, would you add anything relative to the fleet?
We are exploring hydrogen. We've got the first demo vehicle. Actually, we've had 2 demo vehicles here. The first Toyota Mirai is actually on order. The main limiting factor is the availability of the hydrogen station. Right now we're fueling at San Leandro site, which is about 8 miles from the courtyard. We really need close access to the downtown area, and we think there's an opportunity there with the AC Transit hydrogen station. If we ever get that public access open on the other side of the fence, that would be very helpful. That's just a short drive from the downtown Oakland area. So, you know, not to catch anyone by surprise, but these are things that we're thinking about with hydrogen.
Should only be a couple months. We've signed the contract.
So, and I'll jump in here from the city of San Francisco that we have a U.S. Department of Energy grant to do hydrogen outreach and to help facilitate the approval of the stations that have been proposed. So I think I should have these numbers in front of me, but I think we have 16 stations now, either in construction or development for retail use in the Bay Area, including some recent awards for San Francisco, Oakland, Walnut Creek, Berkeley. So we'll be working on it at San Francisco. And so if you're interested in light duty and medium duty hydrogen, we're working on that, and you can send me an email. We'll put you on our distribution list. Where? In the back. Could you stand up, please?
Yes. For the reduction of greenhouse gases, whether it be specifically for San Francisco, how are the emissions that are contributed by people commuting into the city factored in, given that it's still maybe the biggest node for transportation as people out of the Bay Area? And then also, what incentives, it sounds like the incentives are more for people who live in the city to change from an internal combustion engine vehicle to electric vehicle. What are incentives, if any, to get people who commute in to change from an ICE vehicle with one person to electric vehicle, besides sort of carpool lane, that type of stuff? Thank you.
So for our part, I'll probably tag team with Suzanne on your question, but the that particular analysis that I showed the slide, that was a scope 2 analysis, and it was based on essentially accrediting half of that trip if you're if you were a transient, if you're coming to and from the city, crediting half of that trip to the San Francisco in terms of calculating their emissions. In terms of incentives, the things I'm aware of are more the classic, as Californians we have access to the carpool lane through use of clean vehicles, but I'm sure you have a more detailed answer.
I'm not the transportation demand management expert.
As far as just straight incentives, there's the $7,500 tax credit for the dedicated zero emission vehicles, and then also through the California Clean Vehicle Rebate Program, I believe it's $2,500 for dedicated battery electric and $1,500 for plug-in hybrid. The Air Quality Management District also, and we'll have a representative here in one of the later panels, also from time to time offers incentives for both charging infrastructure and for buying the battery electric vehicles. And then of course you have your utilities. If anybody in here own a plug-in vehicle, show of hand. If you're a PG&E customer, you're eligible for a $500 rebate that came out last year. I mean, I have a plug-in vehicle. I didn't apply for it yet. And there's also frequently incentives for charging infrastructure. There's a lot of opportunities out there, and these windows, the doors, I should call them, open because they close sometimes. So it's difficult to stay on top of those things. I would recommend that you connect with your local Clean Cities Coalition or other clean air vehicle advocacy group. There's many electric vehicle enthusiast groups, EV clubs. They're the best source of what's currently available. Get yourself on the mailing list and you will be the first to know. Is that what you were looking for?
Well, not really. All those things incentivize anyone purchasing that vehicle in the state or nationwide, but what specific, like, for example, parking is probably a much bigger concern of anyone coming into the city than can I find a charger, especially if cars have 200-mile range. If you don't live in the city, you don't really care, I don't think, if you can charge in the city. But as far as parking in the city goes, or are there dedicated parking spaces? I mean, there's an idea, but is anything being done to promote people who are going to commute into San Francisco or commute into Oakland or commute into San Jose to be like, the only way this makes sense is with an electric vehicle? Whereas right now there's no, aside from having a little bit cheaper fuel, there's no real incentive, and saving $250 or a little bit of time on the carpool lane, but you can pick someone casual carpool and do the same thing. So there isn't a big incentive to have an electric car and commute incentives as much, it seems.
I think it's really important to put your question in the context of transportation in general, right? So what is the biggest incentive? It's that we invested in the 60s and 70s in the BART system, right? And that is the core of transportation individual transportation to and from the city. There's similarly Daniel presented on renewable diesel. It was not my work, but many other people have brokered the not just the transition of our own fleets to renewable diesel, but there is extensive discussion with the ferry fleets about essentially eliminating carbon emissions from that transportation mode to and from the city. And because the cost of those fuels is competitive, I'm not sure of the status, but it is either there's either been a decision or it will happen in the near term. It's a shotgun rather than a silver bullet. In general, though, I think the main controversy we had adopting this electric vehicle readiness ordinance was the priority in San Francisco is transit first. And so we need to be clear that the first thing that happens, input to that equation of providing charging capacity for 20% of parking spaces is we end up minimizing parking spaces intentionally by zoning in order to, again, make transit and other alternative modes of transportation the most effective choice for the greatest number of people, and that will continue to be the strategy. Is that the individual cars will continue to exist, and electric car share will become very important, of course, and yet transit is really the core answer to your question. How are we providing incentives as a society for reducing carbon emissions?
Something to consider too. This is not an existing program, but this is where I see the market going on this. You have San Francisco, who has an active CCA. You have the East Bay, who's already formed a CCA and will start delivering power in the spring of next year, and San Jose, who's actively considering it next week. Within those, there are now 7 community choice aggregators in the Bay Area. All of them are in the business of selling electricity. What you're asking from a slightly different perspective is, hey, how could somebody sell more electricity? Meaning more charging infrastructure. The CCAs should be very interested in this as a business concept, switching off of a fuel that has higher carbon emissions, which they are promising to reduce, and to electricity, which they happen to sell. This is a natural bridge for a product for the CCAs to offer, and CCAs have a tremendous amount of resources to dedicate to program design of some kind, whether it ends up being energy efficiency, whether it ends up being fuel switching for things like heat pumps, as Barry mentioned, has to go into buildings to reach our long-term goals, or fuel switching for transportation. I think these are likely high priorities, and in the case of Silicon Valley, for instance, their first-year projected reserves are estimated to be $70 million. That's a lot more than PG&E puts into any local program. It's a lot more than any of our cities put into a local transportation program, and this is an average annualized revenue stream, and all of the CCAs are going to have some form of this. Whether it's as high as that or not depends on their rates, but this is a huge opportunity for clean vehicle advocates to start pushing those CCAs to focus on things like fuel switching to electric vehicles or hydrogen vehicles for that matter. Either way, I think it still supports their broad-based GHG reduction goals and pushing the automobile makers to be more reactive to a market that we can help guide.
And just following up from that, this is Trina Martinowitz with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency outside of in San Francisco, but this entire region. Perfect plug. I am coordinating that effort. I think I'm the sole person really focusing on exactly that, electrifying the CCEs on the transportation arena. So if anyone is at all interested in this effort, it's just kind of launching now. Please see me, but we're directly supporting MCE Clean Energy in Marin and Richmond in the East Bay north of us, but we're going to be essentially creating an electric vehicle strategy for all other CCs throughout the state to adopt. So we will all be coordinating with all of you in the next upcoming months. But yeah, feel free to come by and see me out.
And for those of you not in the loop, CCA and CCE are interchangeable. One means community choice aggregation, one community choice energy. They're synonymous.
And in terms of incentives that we listed, if you go to the San Francisco Department of Environment incentive page, we have all the incentives listed there. for you. And if you're ever gonna buy an electric vehicle and you want to use that tax rebate, I would do that this year. Just saying. Yeah. How much? We have a few more minutes.
Time for another question or two.
Nick, I think Nick Newton.
Yes, thank you for the great presentation. My question for the three of you guys is, I think in your presentations you spoke about electrifying your fleets, and I think you guys kind of nailed the low-hanging fruits like the sedans and whatnot. In terms of the rest of the fleet, like your public works fleets, that more medium heavy-duty vehicles, obviously the variety is not in the market. How have you guys tried to move the needle or move the dial with the OEMs and the manufacturers to get vehicles that can provide you with mission-specific vehicles that you can then convert the rest of the fleets?
So this might be a better question for the fleet panel, but I think one of the things was the RFI for electric vehicles. That really looked at, that was released last year. And you can still join on to that if you're a city and you want to add your potential fleet procurement numbers to the RFI. We're compiling all those numbers so that we can demonstrate to the OEMs that we have the procurement power. So we're still working on that, but part of that was sort of to draw the market to say, hey, we have this demand for pickup trucks, right? We all buy electric pickup trucks, and for these medium duty and specialty vehicles in the middle. So we've gotten bids, but the point was to sort of draw the market and show them what we have. And I'm happy to talk to, any of us can talk about that afterward.
You have to ask that question for the fleet panel, okay? We're gonna hold you to
Please.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, another question.
Anybody else?
All right. That's
Great. Well, thank you guys so much for.
That's my theme song.